Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. And I'm George Vins, and we're continuing the discussion this evening of equity in the school system. And returning to help us understand it is we have the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Sue Charochak, and the Director of Opportunity, Equity, and
access. It's a real tongue twister, I know.
Yes, I know. You must have a 3x5 card as your business card, but anyway. Anyway, it's Dr. Andre Morgan. Welcome again, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Many thanks. Thanks for having us.
And I guess the thing that hangs me up is this whole business of the woke world redefining words. And as I mentioned the last time, I'm satisfied with equity as being my share of the house that I'm paying off on a mortgage and how much stock I own or don't own anymore, depending on what the market did to me today. But in your world, the education world, equity is somehow related to equal outcomes. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. How does it work? How do you get equal outcomes?
So I think first and foremost, you've got to be mindful that every student has the capacity to learn. So we believe that every student is valuable, and they have that ability. And so part of the entrance of the word equity into the education sector across the nation has been to recognize that every student has capacity. And so when you hear us use the terminology all students, it really means all students with all varying abilities, all types of experiences, all backgrounds, literally all meaning all. I think one of the issues that has permeated the sector is a lack of understanding around the term equity. Yeah. And so when it comes to discussions around equity, many people believe that it's conjoined with critical race theory and any conversation that deals with race. And so you have this dichotomy in our nation that equity is a bad thing. That by standing up equity, then what we're really doing is we're teaching race all day in our classrooms. And what we're also teaching is that, white students are privileged and bear the burden of what has happened historically in our nation. And that's far from what equity represents. Mm-hmm. Equity means that we're paying attention to every student. So it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. Doesn't matter what your upbringing is. Doesn't matter the color of your skin. Doesn't matter your learning ability. It doesn't matter your language ability. We're responsible as a district to meet those varying needs.
Well, that's where I stumble on another thing. Matt, could you put up the cartoon from last time around? Yeah. We looked at this cartoon the last time, and you got three kids standing on a box, and for the kid in the middle, he needs the box. The kid on the left end doesn't need the box, and the kid on the right end, it ain't enough. So that is the definition of equality. Then they show it as taking the box from the tall kid, giving it to the very short kid, and then everybody can peer over the fence, which means you get equal outcome, okay? One of the things that's thinking about this bothers me is that if you label that box that the tall kid is standing on, AP standing for advanced placement, or some of that nature, something over and above, all of a sudden it looks like you're level loading this thing or dumbing down the program, because the kid that could go farther doesn't have that opportunity.
I don't think I would have started with that as box as being an AP. I think what that is representing is that not that what is offered to all students, but how all students access what is offered, right? So we don't water down or change our offerings. We just scaffold it so that every student has the opportunity to access that experience. Mm-hmm. So the boxes represent maybe scaffolding that we might need to do, or
what do you mean by scaffolding? I'm not.
So, how the way in which we present our course offerings, the way in which we find students that are interested in taking those courses, the way in which we may have to engage families in order to understand how a student would enter or sign up for or register for an AP class. Or once they're in it, the kinds of supports they might need. They might need an opportunity to have a quiet space after school in the library to do their homework. Not everybody needs that, but someone might need that in order to be successful. So those boxes represent the things that we need to support students so that they have access to all of those things. We don't take things away. We're just trying to find out what do we need to do to make sure that all students have the opportunity to access them.
Well, it makes it sound like each kid's got his own set of boxes, and not every kid gets the same set of boxes because he doesn't have the same kind of needs. Reasonable?
I would accept that.
Okay. All right. So, and one of the other things I picked up on is as I'm going through this, thinking of how we're going to have this discussion is there's an old commercial for the Army, and the tagline is "Be all that you can be." Mm-hmm. And I think that's the kind of thing that I would like to see the school system do, that every kid gets encouraged, pushed, guided, whatever words you want to use, to his or her maximum ability. Fair enough?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, okay, we got this other part of the system is that you got limited resources. Now, school committee takes up an awful lot of the city budget, passes it on to the school department. How do you balance all this? That's the other thing I get concerned about. It sounds good to say those kinds of things, but how do you make it happen?
I think that one of the things that we do in Beverly very well is that each time we go into the budget process and each time we go into the budget season, we're looking across all of the resources that we have and maximizing resources where they can be maximized, right? And making sure that we're efficient in the way that we're using funds. So it isn't that we take money away from one or to another. I think sometimes it's in the way in which we're utilizing it. So, for example, I talked a little bit about access to AP classes. Right, the way in which we provide the program of studies and introduce students to the course selection process was changed. We recognized that in order to make sure that we're meeting all of the students and having everyone have a good understanding about what was available to them and how they could access it, we needed to change the way in which we brought those courses forward. So our Director of College and Career Readiness, Julie Ferrara, who has done an amazing job, revamped the whole way we do course selection. So, but that wasn't a cost. That was just doing our work more efficiently. And we talk often about equity as a lens as opposed to like, I'm going to do equity on Thursday. Equity isn't a thing that you do one day of the week. Equity is something that you say, I want to take a look at how we're doing business. And we may have set a goal that we're going to do one certain thing. And before we even go to the next step, what we're trying to do intentionally in Beverly is to say, and how will this impact all of the different student groups that we have? How will it impact multi-language learners in our district? How will it impact our economically disadvantaged? How will it impact our students of color? How will it impact our first-generation students, maybe Hispanic, Latino? And so, not that we're going to spend more money differently, but we're going to make sure that what we're using our resources for is accessible for everybody.
Yeah. And how do you get involved in moving this around?
On a number of different levels. And so, we talk about equity, it's not a checklist. It's a part of the culture. It's a part of the framework for our day-to-day work. And so my role is to really be at the table and help ensure that we're considering all students in our decision making.
Well, when you say you're considering all students, we've had this discussion before of the variety of students that you have in the system and abilities and backgrounds and all that. They all bring to the classroom every morning, and the teacher is faced with this diverse group of students on ability level. And I guess the concern I have is, there's aides in the classroom in some classrooms. All classrooms have aides?
Well, I'm going to stop you just for a second because you keep talking about it as ability level. I would like to talk it about as entry points into a curriculum or into
Okay, what's more
understanding.
What's more involved in
because
an entry point than just ability?
So, because it might be lack of exposure. It might be that, the type of background knowledge that you might need to build up for someone. It's not that they can't do it, but they can't do it yet because they may not have the background knowledge that's needed. There may be English learners who need some extra work on vocabulary. It's not their ability to do it. It's whether or not they have the background knowledge needed to apply into that progression of skill. So, I want to be very careful about making it ability based because it's really more we're looking to say we believe that all students have the opportunity to access this curriculum and should be accessing the curriculum at the grade level standard. So that's what we're trying to do. Some children enter into that standard at a different point, and they might need extra supports to get there. Some students enter into that standard above the standard, and we need to make sure that we're challenging them. So this range of learners and where they sit in the classroom is actually a really positive opportunity. You can utilize that and you can have a much more rich and diverse conversation and learning and connections to authenticity. So it's not necessarily a challenge as much as it can be an opportunity as well.
Well, when you get to this level of understanding of your class, we're talking about the typical teacher. Back to the questions, do all teachers have aides?
No.
Okay.
So teachers don't have aides. Some students may have supports in a plan that they have
So that
for a
comes-
particular reason, but teachers don't have aides.
So it comes with the IEP.
Some students may have, it may have been determined through either an IEP process or other reason that they need extra supports in the classroom, and then there might be an additional support person in the classroom for that
So
group.
the aides are on a by student basis.
By need.
By need of the student basis. Okay. When we start to talk about access to these things, how do you determine that a kid needs a certain type of support? Whether it's filling in the background because he didn't get it at home, or it's, like you say, one of these
That's a great question.
language learners.
Yep. So when teachers are making their plans, when they're planning their lessons, that's one of the first things they want to do is take a look at who is in my classroom, what needs do they have, what is my outcome that I want for everyone to have learned out of this lesson, and where do I need to build in certain pieces for certain students. It comes from data. It comes from entry and exit tickets. It comes from
What's an entry and
assessment.
exit?
So it's mini assessment. So you might do a quick quiz. You might have called it a quiz in your day, right?
Oh, yes.
So something like that, where they get an opportunity to kind of get an understanding of where students are. It might come from a Socratic discussion in the classroom to kind of hear where students are and what their thoughts are and where we might want to push their thinking. So that kind of formative assessment, formative gathering of information tells you what you might need to do and should lead to where you go with your lesson plan, and then how you decide to deliver instruction and to whom and what it needs to look like.
Okay.
And added to that, if I can jump on, going back to our visual from a few minutes ago,
Yeah.
just because you have a student who gets an additional box today doesn't mean that they're going to need that same additional box tomorrow.
Right.
And so with every lesson, if you will, students exhibit different abilities.
Oh, yeah.
And our goal is to try to meet students where they are and expand their current level of knowledge.
Yeah. In this day and age, I would have a very difficult time getting into biotech. I just can't handle the Latin. Never could. And
Well, maybe you
I
just needed the right
personally
motivation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more than motivation. It just doesn't sink in. And I recognize in my own case that I have certain abilities. I can do some things very well. I consider myself reasonably good at math. But language,
So you just described what we call asset-based lessons, right? So we want to build on your strengths. We're not going to try to to dig down into those areas that you find to be more challenging. We're not, and we don't want to think about students as coming into a learning environment as deficit based, right? So we don't want to look at a student who comes in whose vocabulary may be weaker as that being a deficit. We want to say, well, their vocabulary is weaker, but guess what? They have come in every day. They're well prepared. What are the assets? What are their strengths?
Yeah.
Are they visual learners? Do they have a great ability to catch on to information quickly? Those are the kinds of things that drive how we design what we call tier 1 instruction, how we design what that experience in the classroom feels like. And so that is exactly what you're describing, exactly that.
Well, when you get to the question of opportunities, how do you structure the system such that all these extra opportunities are available? How do you recognize which ones you need? How do you define the opportunities for, first of all, I guess, each grade level, and then eventually for each student? And again, I'm talking in my own case that, hey, math and science I have a great time with. Hated history with a passion until I got to learn that history is his story. And if you get a real history book where you see the story, that's a different ball game. And for me, it wasn't until I was in the Army that I finally got a good history book. And it happened to be The Armada by Garrett Mattingly. I'll never forget that book. And these kinds of things, I think, hopefully kids are getting to it a hell of a lot sooner than I did. So how do you make sure that the opportunities are really tailored to the students?
You want to start us off?
Sure. I mean, I would say it starts with the importance of relationships, right? Teachers have to know the students that are in their classroom. But more importantly, again, I'm going to use your own example, making sure that education feels authentic and relevant, and that we are able to kind of discover what is the passion and how do we reach and what will we find engaging. And so that level of engagement lends to the level of success that we have in delivering our instruction.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And so, I think when you talk about what's the opportunity point, if you will, or how do you create the opportunity, I think you've got to think about it holistically. You've got to think about what opportunities are beneficial across the board, and not just looking at it from a short-term perspective, but the long-term as well. Where would we like to see students? Even thinking years down the line, where do we want our students to be at the time that they graduate from the 12th grade? When they walk across the stage and get a diploma and they go on to the next chapter of their lives, what skill sets should they know? And that's one of the reasons why we build on this theme of equity, because when students leave, they're walking into a more diverse world than they're already in.
Yeah.
And they've got to be able to function in that, wherever it is that they are, whether they stay here locally or whether they go across the nation or go abroad. And so we want to make sure that we're creating people who aren't bystanders but upstanders, and people who can really change inequities when they see them, across the span of their lives.
Try that again, the bystanders and upstanders.
So, the idea of a upstander is that when you see something that's wrong, you make a conscious decision to step in and try to provide some form of correction.
Okay.
Based on your comfortability, based on your familiarity, based on your skill sets. All of us have that ability in us. We just make a choice each and every day in terms of how we want to stand up to things that may trigger us in some way, shape, or form. Or to something for some harm that's being caused or initiated across the spectrum in some way. So do you stand up and address it when you see it, or do you just kind of put your hands up and back away from the table?
Yeah. Well, that gets to be the other half of the problem, is recognize things you can fix and things you can't.
Well, I mean, our goal is to fix as much of the inequities as possible. And is it an easy job? No. And so, we don't sit here in a bubble and say, this is a piece of cake and, it makes every day easy. In fact, it's challenging.
Yeah.
It's challenging to consider diverse experiences each and every day, in each and every context, in each and every decision. And each time we make those decisions with all students in mind, it triggers people, some people, not all, because there's not a good understanding of what we mean by equity.
And yet, you said something in earlier in your conversation, sort of, we spend a lot of time, and this is sort of a really important part of how we're thinking about that lens of equity, in thinking about what is needed in the workforce today. What do students need to know and be able to do to be successful, not just to walk across the stage and get their diploma, but after they take those 3 steps down, where are they going? What are they going to do? And how are they going to be successful in that? And so those graduate outcomes that we think about, those opportunities, we know there's a lot of awareness that there's been a gap in opportunity for kids. Different groups of kids have maybe not had the same opportunities as others, but yet we know that the workforce is going to demand a certain skill set from all of our students. And so we want to make sure that as we're designing and looking at pathways for students as they're in high school, they're thinking about what maybe, early on, what kinds of careers. Is it a career in medicine? Is it a career in, technology? Am I thinking about something more in the food service industry, like whatever, right? That they have this opportunity, and that we're creating a generous program of studies, and that kids are able to access at a high level all of the things they need, so that when they walk off that stage, they're prepared for a 4-year college, a 2-year college, opportunity in the workforce if they're going straight into the workforce, whatever it is. We want to make sure that everybody has had that experience in high school, so they have what they need when they leave. And that hasn't always been the case. That is what the gap is that we're working to fill.
I think I've mentioned this before, that they used to have a program, they still do, I guess, at the high school and senior center, breakfast with seniors.
Mm-hmm. We just
and I remember meeting 2 young ladies who were interested in veterinary school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked them, why aren't you at Essex Tech? And the first girl answered that, she didn't want to leave her friends. Mm-hmm. Okay, you got a certain relationship,
Mm-hmm.
You're comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
and I can understand that. Asked the second girl, she says, I didn't realize you could go to college from Essex Tech. That rings a bell that says that's an area that needs, I think, discussion. And I think the more general version of that is, where do the students get the idea, especially when you get to the middle school level, of, okay, what happens next?
It's a great question.
And when you have, and how do you tailor that to a student to say that, hey, you're a tactile learner. You would be better off in Essex Tech playing with the hardware.
Yeah. So we don't make judgments for kids about what they should or shouldn't do. But what we have done is we've really we have a guidance counselor in the 8th grade. We provide lots of opportunities for kids to explore and understand what kinds of careers and what kinds of opportunities are out there. We have Essex Tech come in and talk about what they offer. Our own high school goes down and talks about the pathways that we have to offer, and we begin that conversation with students just at an earlier time. They need to be thinking a little bit about that for those who might take a different pathway than Beverly High School. But also, if they're going to Beverly High School, when they're in the freshman, there's a course that we've created for every freshman that talks about what their future career success looks like. It's a course that was specifically designed for kids to kind of explore my future career and success. What will that look like? What opportunities might be available? What are my passions? Where are my strengths? Where do I find the most success? And then they have that opportunity to explore what the different pathways that we offer and any other opportunities that are out there.
And if you'll let me make a tie, I heard you talk about relationships a little earlier.
Yeah.
And we talk talk about relationships regularly, because relationships as a student, between student and teacher really make a marked difference. I'll give you a personal example. In elementary school, middle school, I absolutely hated math, just detested it, and I didn't have that connection with my teachers. And so when I got to 10th grade geometry, I had a teacher that I just really connected with on a major level. And it turned my whole perspective around with mathematics. So when I left that class and that particular teacher and went on to elementary functions and pre-calculus and then even on to calculus in college, I did well in that. And that wasn't a capability I thought I could experience because I just never liked it.
Yeah.
I did okay in it, but I had to stay on top of it. But there was never anybody to encourage me and to say, hey, you can do this, with a little more prodding and encouragement as well. So when I got that opportunity, it really changed my perspective. And we find even today that relationships matter. It can really dictate what you ultimately go on to do in life. It can dictate how well or how poorly you do in classes. It can really change the diameter, if you will, just of a student's perspective and self-image.
Yeah. So the individual teacher, I recognize, makes a difference. I know that I've had similar experiences with some teachers that, oh, no, not him again. And the other was that, oh, yeah, I want to have that teacher again. Why aren't you teaching the next level or something like that? So you get into those kind of relationships that some people just ring your bell and it works. And others that they put a damper on it. And,
yeah, it matters.
And one of the ones I like to use is when I got to high school, I discovered the library and got to read. And I still have the chalk marks up the side of my head where I got hit with the eraser because I had a science fiction novel in front of behind my math book or something. And,
But for some kids, they discover the music, and they're in the music department. And others, it's art, and they find the arts, or ROTC, and they really enjoy that. Or they get into the Earth Science Club, or And I think one of the really strong points of Beverly High School is that we have a huge offering. There's pretty much, if you have an interest, you can find something to join, and if you don't find it, we'll help you create it. So that's the high school experience, and that's really important.
do you ever have anything like a shop fair or a career fair?
Yeah. Oh, we have, So again, Julie Ferrara, who is our Director of College and Career Readiness, we not only have a college fair, but we have a career fair. So that we give opportunities for students to explore not only just that traditional four-year college experience, but on a separate day we have another
At
whole
what level does that happen?
high school, and probably I think freshmen and sophomores. I think it was freshmen and sophomores. So they're exploring different careers and different ideas and different opportunities. And I actually think there was one at the middle school too, right?
There was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to talk? I don't know. You probably know more about the middle school one.
Yeah, and so we did one in the middle school this year, and it was really an opportunity to really capsulize on something you mentioned a little earlier about drilling down in the younger grades. How do we begin to motivate and encourage younger students to think about their next steps? And this was one such pathway to do that.
Yeah, my brief experience in teaching is I recognize the fourth graders are asking good questions. And that's when I think you need to have subject-specific teachers, especially in math and science. That's my bug. Being able to explain things to them in the right way, as opposed to textbook answers. And
But that's part of equity, being able to have those conversations and not be afraid to have them. And I think that's where some of the pushback comes in.
Yeah.
With families across the nation, is that there's a limited understanding of what equity really is,
Yeah,
why it
that's-
matters, and why we need to be having those
That's the
conversations.
thing that bugs me is that everybody's got an understanding of equity, and now you're using it in a different way. And it does not compute with me, and I can imagine there's a lot of people that, what on earth is he talking about? And they have no idea, and I think that's one of the detriments to it. But anyway, we've had about our half hour of fun, and thank you very much for coming by again and expanding on it. And I don't think we're finished yet because I say I got a few more questions that I could have got into. Being an old Boy Scout, I come prepared, kind of thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And as you'll notice after the credits, there's my email address. If you've got some questions or some comments, feel free. And if you have a point of view you want to present, hey, we can make room for you here at the table. And stay tuned, we'll be back.